In the world of sports, your performance is everything. So what happens when our minds end up impacting our performance? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Mindful Sports Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mindful Sports. Thank you guys for being here today, and I have a very important question for everyone. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of what other people think? Are you afraid of what you think of yourself? Fear of failure, fear of negative things is a big part of what athletes have to go through a lot. This is especially true in today's society as we're starting to become more and more involved in athletes' lives. Now, yes, we all want to say, they don't read the comments, oh, they don't react, they don't really care, that's just the PR manager. But what people say really does matter to an athlete. Now, it's maybe not necessarily going to matter as the end all be all. And if somebody says the wrong thing, oh man, that athlete's day is ruined and it's terrible. But it might put a little chip in there. Just a little nick of confidence. Maybe they had a string of 2 or 3 bad games. And now everywhere they look, every article they're writing, the way that teammates are viewing them, the way that coaches are viewing them, the way that fans are viewing them, all starts to have questions. What's wrong? Why isn't this person doing what they're normally doing? That can really eat at an athlete. What they think of their own failures, of not being able to put together multiple different successful games, and instead struggling and struggling and failing to succeed yet again. Athletes' lives are all about up and down. They go from great to horrible, and they can turn on a dime. And being afraid of that can keep athletes from performing at a level that they should be. It can keep athletes from doing the things that need to be done to succeed. This is very similar to how, even in everyday life, everyone can struggle with this. Sometimes we see this fear eventually lead into depression or anxiety or stress. And all of these can cause added health problems. And that all stems from being afraid of something. Now, that isn't to say that all of these conditions always stem from fear. They don't. There's too many other things that can go into this. But being afraid is something that we don't expect from athletes. When we get nervous, when we get anxious, we start getting a little jittery. Maybe it's because we're afraid of something. And that fear is what's making us anxious. And so for an athlete, we have to be able to address these fears. Maybe it's fear that you're supposed to be the number one prospect on your team, or as a high school or college athlete moving on to your respective next level. And the weight of those expectations that suddenly start to hit you as you really enter that next level and see how much deeper things go and see how much more involved other people are. That can cause a lot of anxiety. It can cause you to be pretty darn afraid for your own performance and not knowing whether or not you can actually perform at that level. And that leads us to another type of fear. Are you afraid to be the best? Are you afraid to be successful? Are you afraid that you are in a spot where you don't belong? A lot of people may know that this is officially called imposter syndrome, where you don't believe that you're good enough to be where you're at. It happens to a lot of us. I'll be honest, it's happened to me. It has even recently happened to me because I have just been accepted to starting a program for my doctorate in sport and performance psychology. That's a big deal. It means a lot. Trying to get into one of those programs, it's not easy. But I often can find myself questioning, am I good enough to really be here? Do I deserve to be here? What happens if I fail? What happens if I'm not good enough? How is that going to change people's perspectives? How's it going to change my perspective? If this thing that I want to do, that I long to do, that I look forward to doing, suddenly turns out to be too much. I'm not good enough to be there. I don't have the drive to be there. Athletes experience the same thing. My 7-year-old daughter experiences the same thing, where she's in a position that we all know she should be in, that she's proven that she can be good at. And yet, she doubts herself. She's afraid to try and be successful because she's afraid that she might fail. She's afraid that she's not good enough to be where she's at. 7-year-old. Me, 31 years old. Athletes every single day of all varying ages. This is something that we all struggle with. But I wanna let you know something real quick. Just a little secret. It's okay. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have these fears. It's perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural. The question is, will you let that fear control your decision? Will you let being afraid to fail keep you from pursuing it? Will you let being afraid to succeed mess with your head and cause you to make mistakes that you shouldn't be? A lot of times, fear of success and fear of failure, two opposite ends, can look the same. They can feel the same because it's all fear. In the end, fear doesn't matter and doesn't care about the specific thing that you are afraid of. In the end, fear is fear. Fear will mess with your head. And right now, let's take a short break. We'll be right back to continue this discussion. Welcome back, everybody. So we talked a little bit about fear of failure and fear of success. It's okay to be afraid, but we have to decide what we're going to do about it. So what are we going to do about it? How do we combat fear? It's a natural instinct when we're faced with something that is unknown. You've heard the phrase fight or flight. It's what it is. You going to have the courage to fight? Or are you going to be afraid and run away? How do we overcome fear? And there's a few ways that we could do this. There is being introduced to fear continually in small bits, doing things that make us nervous, doing things that make us feel like we're not necessarily in control, that we're uncomfortable, but doing it for a small bit or a short amount of time, and then working a little further on it, going a little farther, lasting a little longer. Or we can just jump right in, acknowledge the fact that we're afraid, and make the decision that, yes, while we are afraid, we're not going to let the fear stop us. I have a not so little sister that used to be extremely terrified of heights. Me as her big brother, I made her go on heights. I didn't always make her go on heights alone. I didn't always push her beyond her breaking point, but I challenged her. If she needed a hand, I went with her. We talked about how it was safe. Went over how you're okay. That your fear is an emotion and you can control your emotions. That your fear is not irrational. There are times, yes, where you can have an irrational fear, but for the most part, our fears are grounded in something. You failed before. You've succeeded before and gotten to some place only to find out that maybe you didn't actually belong there. You were in the military and you got promoted to incompetence. Essentially meaning that you were great at what you did, so great that they chose to promote you, but you weren't prepared for that promotion. You didn't know what to do. You didn't know how to handle it. You didn't have the skills. You weren't the right type of leader that was needed there. And so instead of being set up for success, you ended up failing because you were put in a position where you didn't belong. And now, every time you get that next promotion, that next bump up, you start feeling good, that scenario plays in your mind. I've been here before. I've done this before and I failed. Now it becomes uncomfortable to move forward because you experienced a situation where you moved too far forward too soon. Maybe you had a big moment. You had several big moments in your sport and you dropped the ball. You didn't make your goal. You didn't make your shot. This is a lot about what we talk through when you're a sports psychologist is you talk about how to overcome these things. Sometimes for fear, it's visualization, visualizing where you want to go, what you want to do. Because you could be afraid of not having a plan, of not knowing what to do. So put it in your mind, visualize it. What do you see happening? What are you going to do in this situation? And when you do that, you start to improve. You feel that fear start to kind of slip away. You're not as afraid anymore because you have a plan. So whether it's jumping into the fire, getting it done, taking it baby steps at a time, building yourself up, working through your fear in small increments, or whether it's visualizing what it is that you need to do. Maybe fear means that you need to put in a little more extra practice, a little bit more work. Feel comfortable to gain your confidence. Because maybe your lack of confidence is why you're so fearful. You're not confident enough in your own skills. And we're not talking about being cocky and thinking that you're all of that, but being confident in what you can do, what you know you can do, what you know you should be able to do. You're not boisterous about it, but you know it. And you're willing to go do it. That lack of confidence, not feeling that way, can create fear. Can be a source behind your fear. Maybe you're afraid because you experience something outside of the realm of sports. And now you're distracted. And you're focused on that situation or that incident. Could be a long time ago, could be recent. But you're worried about it. Don't let fear stop you. Don't let people make you think that being afraid is something terrible. Because it's not. It's natural. Everyone is afraid of something. It's different for everyone. Nobody's going to have the exact same fears as somebody else. But everyone is afraid of something. Being able to acknowledge your fear is a great way and a great first step to overcoming your fear, to finding a plan that works for you on how you're going to not let that fear stop you. It's another one of my FPTA incidents. Feel, process, think, act. FPTA. I came up with that because too often in today's society, we let our emotions control us. And when we come back from this short break, we'll go into that a little bit more and dive into what this is, a little more detail about why I came up with this, and how we can work moving forward from our fears. Welcome back, everyone. At the end of the last segment, we talked about FPTA, FPTA, feel, process, think, act. Breaking each of these down, we started out with feel. Why? Because feelings are important. And a lot of people think that, oh, you can just get over it. Oh, it's not that big a deal. Well, what are you afraid of? It's not that bad. There's so many ways that we push people's feelings aside. On the flip side of that, we have where our society is moving towards today, that feelings are what matter the most. That if your feelings are hurt, you're justified in your position. That if your feelings aren't respected, then everything is in the wrong and the other person needs to be punished. We put feelings up on a pedestal. The problem is that when we allow feelings to be our pedestal, we erase our logic. But on the flip side of that, if we put logic on our pedestal, we start to erase the feelings. There's a spot in the middle where we acknowledge our feelings, where we understand that our feelings are valid, that we are allowed to have those feelings. In this case, we are allowed to be afraid. Don't let people make fun of you or invalidate the fact that you're afraid. Maybe they can handle more than you. Maybe you can handle more than somebody else. We're all individuals. Our feelings are going to vary vastly. And that's okay, because your feelings are still valid. However, when we have our feelings, we then have to process them. Why do we feel this way? What made us have these feelings? Have we felt this way before? What happens when we feel this way? Could it be that maybe what we're feeling is due to what we see and what we perceive, and not necessarily what is? Could our feelings be coming from a thought that we're in a different spot, a better spot than somebody else? Could our feelings in this situation actually be from something completely unrelated to what's going on? We had a bad day. Now somebody pissed us off, made us angry, and we'll blow up at them. We've been struggling to remember things all day. And now we just made a mistake in the game. Now we're afraid that we're going to mess up again. We're afraid to fail because we've been failing our entire lives. We're afraid to succeed because we don't believe that we should belong here. Process that. Then think about, what should be done. Because this isn't going to be the same in every situation. Just because you feel afraid in this situation and you feel like you gotta just push through, maybe another fear you gotta take it step by step. Maybe another spot you're afraid because you don't have the plan. And so you're uncomfortable and don't have the confidence. Think about the fear. Think about the emotion, the feelings that you had. Think about the process that you just went through. What does that processing mean? What were your outcomes of that? Is it related? And the last step is act. Acting is the last step. Now, why is acting the last step? Well, acting is the last step because if we don't do those other three, we'll likely act because of our emotions. Notice I didn't say that we would act with our emotions. I didn't say that we would act on our emotions. We would act because of our feelings and how we feel about something. We've put feeling up on a pedestal. See, we put feeling up to start, but then we balance it out with the logic, with the process and the thinking. Because we want to validate our feelings, but we also want to keep our feelings in check. We want to be in control of our emotions. We want to be in control of our feelings. This isn't always easy. This isn't something that is done immediately or instantly. This is something that often needs a lot of training with, often needs a lot of thought process with, needs a lot of practice with. It's going to take time. But we act last because we want to think things through. When we act because of our emotions, we often create more problems than we do solutions. If we're afraid, we start to stumble more. We start to mess up more. If we're angry, we'll shout or say or do something that we regret, that we don't really mean. If we're happy and we get lost in the moment, make a decision that might feel good then, but it doesn't work out in the long term because it wasn't a good decision. It was a decision that we made because of how we felt in that moment. Feelings are momentary. Feelings don't have consequences. Actions have consequences. The choices that we make have consequences. And that's why we have to think before we act. We have to process how we're feeling. That doesn't mean that our feelings aren't involved in the process. Our feelings should be involved in the process. Our feelings are real. Our feelings mean something. And our feelings are valid. But our feelings are not the final decision makers. And that's why acting comes last, after we feel and after we process and think about it. So what are you afraid of? What are you afraid that's going to happen? And what are you going to do about that fear? What actions will you take to overcome that fear? I hope that you guys understand that fear is a major component that a lot of people deal with and struggle with. And that there are ways to overcome it. It doesn't have to keep you from succeeding. It doesn't have to ruin those successful moments. You can do this. Don't let your fear stop you. Feel, process, think, and act. How are you going to overcome your fears today? Let's talk about it. And then I will see you guys again next time. Have a great day.
Please be sure to hit that like button, share this with your friends and family, and leave us a comment down below. Thank you everybody for watching. To stay up to date, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Have a great day.